want to cover up a microphone. Am I okay here, sound-wise? Everybody okay? Good evening, everyone. Today, a grand jury has indicted 4 people in the murder of Preston Lord. And before I discuss the details of these indictments, let me remind you that we are talking about the death of a 16-year-old boy. As I have said in the past, I have spoken with his family, and they are in agony. The loss of a child is unimaginable for most of us, but to live it is a whole new level of horror. I do want to say this to all of those who have continued to post innumerable, unfounded, ill-informed theories on social media. I hope you will pause and consider and evaluate the effect that you may have had on this family over the past several months. Because now you are about to see the crucial steps of the real legal process at work. This has taken months, but not because no one was working on it. Quite the contrary, and I'll say more about that in a moment. The following people were indicted today: Dominic Turner, William Owen Hines, Talon Renner, T-A-L-A-N, and Talon, T-A-L-Y-N, Vigil. Each of them is charged in the alternative with first-degree murder. Felony murder is the theory of the first-degree murder, and in the alternative, second-degree murder. In addition to that, Dominic Turner is charged with aggravated robbery. Each of the 4 is also charged with kidnapping. Arrest warrants were issued after the grand jury handed up the indictments, and the Queen Creek Police Department made arrests of these defendants. What has happened here today is a massive step forward in the quest for justice for Preston Lord. As you'll recall, Preston was beaten while attending a party on October 28, 2023, and he died 2 days later in a hospital. Since then, too many people have complained that nothing was happening, and the family heard that. To you, I say directly, you could not have been more wrong. From the night of the incident, the Queen Creek Police Department has spent hundreds of hours piecing together an extremely complex case that involved dozens of potential players, either suspects, witnesses, or other individuals with knowledge. Chief Bryce is here, and he'll talk to you about that more in a moment. From the time my office received the case in late December, likewise, my team has invested hundreds of hours logging and reviewing evidence. You've heard me say before that the police reports numbered in the thousands of pages, and that there were more than 600 pieces of video evidence that my prosecutors watched over and over and over. In addition, we asked for an investigative grand jury to review the case. Let me explain the difference between what you probably are familiar with as a traditional grand jury and an investigative grand jury. You are probably familiar with a situation in which a completed investigation is presented to a grand jury. It takes a portion of a day, and the grand jury decides whether or not there is probable cause in that case. An investigative grand jury is different. It can be used to conduct further investigation beyond the police investigation. For example, they can require witnesses to appear in front of them via subpoena. They can subpoena documents and other matters. Now, because of the secret nature of grand jury proceedings, that's as far as I'm going to go. I'm not going to tell you what substance was developed in front of the grand jury, and I'm not going to tell you who was called, if anyone, to testify in front of the grand jury. But what I will tell you is this: those take time. Earlier in my career, I was involved in a case where we ran an investigative grand jury, and it took well over a year. So this was done with extraordinary speed. The grand jury has been reviewing this case since February 7th. And then there was another piece of evidence that we absolutely had to have to make this case, and that was the medical examiner's report. That detailed final report was received on February the 14th. And I want to stop and express my appreciation to the Maricopa County Medical Examiner's Office for spending the necessary time to get this exactly right. They undertook a painstaking review, which was so necessary in this particular case. In addition to today's indictments, I will remind you of the dozens of other charges we have brought against some of the same defendants as well as others in the group. And I'm going to give you some updated numbers. These are numbers that do not include the Preston Lord case, to be clear. We have charged 13 adults and 7 juveniles for a total of 20. The adults have been charged cumulatively with 40 counts, juveniles with 14 counts, for a total of 54 charges. This effort on the part of my office and the Queen Creek Police Department, as well as the Gilbert and Mesa Police Departments and other partners in the system, has been a lengthy, meticulous, and thorough investigation and review. And let me emphasize this, let me be very clear. This investigation and review are not over. Additional charges are possible, but obviously I'm not in a position to discuss those specifically tonight. So with that, I would like to invite Queen Creek Police Chief Randy Bryce to the podium, and then we can address questions you may have after his comments.
Thank you, County Attorney Mitchell, for being here, and thank you to the press and the media for being here to listen to kind of the culmination of a lot of effort and all the things that we've done up to this point to really go back to that focus of getting justice for Preston. And the county attorney did a great job of covering a lot of the detail that has brought us to this point, so I won't belabor that, but I want to remind you, as she said, this was a Herculean effort on the part of the police department. As many have said in media and social media, is that we're a brand new department, we're so young, but I will echo the things that have been said about us and say it again, is that we have a very experienced staff that is more than capable of handling these types of investigations, and they've done a wonderful job. I cannot say enough about my staff. They put in countless hours, blood, sweat, and tears to get to this point, and I'm very proud of what they've done. But as County Attorney Mitchell has said, we're not done. We have more to do. These 4 indictments are just the start, and we're going to continue to work to finish up this case and bring a whole conclusion to what we're doing. I would like to also say to the Maricopa County Medical Examiner, we appreciate so much the effort and the speed to which they provided that. I know a lot of the conversation started about this is taking too long, and the frustration that was expressed through various means, not only about our investigation, the Maricopa County Attorney, but the other ancillary services that helped us with this. And I would echo what has been said, is this has been extremely fast in the scheme of how these investigations go. Homicides take a long time to investigate, and as the county attorney said already, it was complex because of the amount of people that we had to talk to and work with and to gather all the evidence that we needed. And it did culminate in hundreds and hundreds of pages, actually said thousands, and she's correct. But again, I'd like to say thank you to my staff and everything that they've done so far. As you know, we did submit in late December, but we are very proud to say that the Maricopa County Attorney's Office done a wonderful job of expediting what they needed to do, but to make sure that they got to the point where they were comfortable, they reviewed everything, and they did an extraordinarily wonderful job to get us to this point where we're just stepping off to the next step. And I think that was well said, is we're not done. This is just the first step into a long process. I would also like to say to the family, we thank you for your patience. We thank you for your support. The family has been at our side and helping us throughout this. And I, too, are frustrated by some of the things that they've had to endure as we have gone through this process, some of the things that they've seen. But they have been undaunted and have helped us throughout this, and I appreciate that. As was said, we received the warrants or late this morning, early afternoon, and we started an operation, days ago to provide the surveillance that we need to get the routines so that when we went to do the apprehensions that we were prepared. But as you know, we have to constantly adapt and change as we go through these operations. But it was a very good operation today. We were able to take that many into custody. Again, we still have more to do. I'd like to say thanks to the teams that were out there and some of the other agencies that have helped us to get to this point, and some of the assistance we received today. Again, we'll have more to come, but I'd like to say again thank you to the public as well for all the stuff that you've provided us, all the help and assistance. And, we continue to get tips, even though we've been to this point. We continue to process those things. But we will be vigilant in finishing up this case. But I'd like to say thank you to them as well. But we'd ask that we continue to be focused on what's important and not, as the county attorney said, be careful about some of the allegations and theories that are put forward. So this is all about making sure that we get justice for Preston and to close out that chapter in the lives of this family. And then moving forward, and we've talked about this numerous times, is to make sure that we are setting up our community and the communities around here with the proper tools and means to make sure that we can handle and manage teen violence and really get to the root of what the problem is. So thank you, and I think we'll take questions at this point.
Are all four in custody, and what are the ages?
So yes, all four are in custody. I don't have the exact ages on the top of my head, but we have, let's see, there is 3 juveniles and 1 adult right now.
Police submitted charges against 7 individuals in December. Today you announced the indictment of 4. Can you give an update on the remaining 3?
I'll just simply say that the investigation, as I said, is ongoing. We're not done yet.
And today we were out at one Gilbert home where Queen Creek Police seemed to be executing a search warrant or looking for an individual. The name that was being read over the loudspeaker is not one of the named individuals that you announced today. Are you still actively looking for suspects to arrest today?
So as County Attorney mentioned, we are actively still working the case, and while I'm not going to comment on the name that was being announced, yes, we are still working on actively to make arrests.
Can you say if everyone that you've announced today is being charged as an adult?
Yes. Yes, they're all being charged, as I said earlier, as an adult.
The community's outside. Can you tell us if more arrests are coming and expected? I know you said the investigation is ongoing.
So again, we don't get into too much of the details, but we will continue to move forward to make sure that we manage and all of the different things that we submitted already, make sure that we have the evidence necessary to move forward.
Is there a message you'd want to put out to individuals that you're currently looking for?
Well, so I think the county attorney has said it well, is that we are going to be relentless about this, and we're not going to stop until we have everybody in custody. But I don't want to go into too much detail because obviously when we do these kind of apprehensions, and even today, we had people interfering with our process and making it difficult for us to actually conduct our surveillance and make the apprehension. So I don't want to provide any more detail that's going to put my officers at risk.
We're going to get back to regular scheduled programming on air, but continue streaming this live on azfamily, our news app website, our Facebook and YouTube page right now.
Well, what I would say is that up to this point, or with the information up to this point, was presented to the grand jury. But again, if any additional information becomes relevant, we will present that as appropriate. But this is an ongoing investigation.
Chief, you've said in the past that you ran into maybe an obstacle when parents were actively refusing to let their children participate in this investigation. And maybe either of you can take this. Do you anticipate that parents in this investigation could face charges moving forward?
So I will say that we are looking at all aspects of this investigation to see if there are any charges that we could bring against people that have either tampered with witnesses or obstruction. We're certainly looking at a lot of those things. I'm not going to comment on the specifics at this point because it's still an investigation.
What was the final, you kind of talked about the medical examiner's report and then I think, this grand jury process, but what was the final piece of the puzzle that allowed you guys to be here today?
Well, I'll speak to my side, and I think the county attorney will definitely talk about, we work collaboratively through this process, and once we submit the charges, there's a real synergy in the way that we put this case together. And so they're looking at it from a prosecutorial aspect, while I'm looking at it from initially a probable cause, but trying to get to the end result of actually finding who was involved in each one of these things. So when we got to a certain point, this is where that synergy really comes to the peak, and we're able to actually get, her office can tell me some of the things they'd like to see, we can work on those things, and we can fine tune the investigation. So I won't say there was just one thing. There was a lot of things that had to be in place, and as County Attorney Mitchell has already said, is that the medical examiner's report was really a key piece. Now, it wasn't the only thing, but it was a key piece because the medical examiner determines the cause of death, the manner of death. Cause of death later to be determined during trial, but she can talk more about that.
Can you give any details of anything they said or any reaction after they were arrested?
So I'm not going to get into the specifics just because, again, a lot of the individuals that we have their Fifth Amendment rights, and we're not going to necessarily get into some of the statements. When that stuff comes to light, as we release our investigation, we'll certainly provide that.
We just got an update that Chief Stolberg and Gilbert would be giving an update here in just about an hour. Does that have any ties to this case?
I can't speak exactly to what Chief Solberg might be talking about. We are definitely a collaborative group of chiefs that talk and try to make sure that we're sharing information. So I was on the phone with him today, keeping him up to date on what we were doing. So while we don't have a direct link necessarily to his investigations, as county attorney has said already, there's a lot of crossover in individuals that either know each other or are involved in our case and their cases. While, again, I can't say this enough, is while I understand that the Gilbert Goons and that moniker is a real point of part of what we're seeing out here and an important piece of that, our focus was specifically on the individuals involved in Preston's death. So that was our focus. While, again, we collaborated with the other chiefs, we remained focused on our investigation and did not necessarily have direct ties to those investigations.
Do any of the outstanding suspects, are any of them wanted on the same charges, including first-degree murder?
I'm not going to address that right now.
With an investigative grand jury, I think a lot of people in the community are probably learning about that process. So if I'm understanding this correctly, you guys could potentially go to them with more evidence and they could review that as this case continues. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, the grand jury actually, if there is an investigative grand jury, conducts the investigation in a very real sense, in the sense that they can call witnesses, they can subpoena records. So if that becomes necessary, we always have that tool available to us.
Were the suspects today taken in without incident?
Yes, there were no injuries, we're always very cognizant of safety and everything that we do. Nobody was injured and everybody's taken into custody without significant problems.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening live to Maricopa County Attorney Rachel Mitchell and Queen Creek Police Chief Randy Bryce confirming today 4 felony murder and kidnapping arrests and indictments for the beating death of 16-year-old Preston Lord, who was attacked after a Halloween house party in Queen Creek. 3 teens and 1 adult, all being charged as adults. They are confirming they're actively working to make more arrests as we speak. So today is 4 months and 1 week to the day, and 2 months after detectives initially forwarded 7 suspects to the county attorneys. At this point, we don't know if all 7 got indictments from the grand jury, Morgan.
Right. We do know that they are still out there looking for at least 1 or 2 more suspects who were indicted. They didn't give us a total number, but they did say that they were still out there trying to arrest some people who were indicted.
Yeah, that's going to be a big headline here. And we also know that of these 4 arrests today, one's previously been arrested.
Yeah, William Owen Hines. He was actually arrested in 2 separate incidents. One was in Gilbert, December 2nd, 2022, an assault there. And then another one was a Higley Riggs assault, November of 2022. And we saw a lot of these teen violence assault investigations coming from the end of 2022. But again, you see him right there, William Owen Hines. He's been indicted before. He's the owner only repeat name that we've heard. And so we don't have a lot of information on the others. We do know that Talon Renner's brother has been previously arrested, also involved in an assault that involved William Owen Hines. So you did hear at the end of that press conference the Queen Creek police chief saying this is all very interconnected among these jurisdictions. Gilbert, Queen Creek, even Mesa, they're all working together to be able to make these arrests.
It sounds like the family is talking. Let's go ahead and take a listen in. All smiles.
There's more. Yep, it's not over.
It's been a long time.
18
Obviously,
weeks, 6 days.
Yep.
did you guys think this would take longer? Did you think that obviously this day would
It
come?
took too long. It took too long.
We all knew the day after what happened, and it shouldn't have taken this long.
The teens, yeah, everybody knew. The public knew. None of this is a surprise.
People that weren't even engaged in the community knew about this. That's bad.
So it took too long.
It
But
did.
we got there, and there's more. I know there are more arrests coming.
There are.
What does this mean to you guys?
This is what we have spent every single day since we found out about working on. So we have a lot of emotions. It's a lot. It's a roller coaster that we're going through. Happiness, grief.
I hope the Lords can start to find a little more peace.
Do you have a reaction to what you heard in the press conference so far tonight?
I think that Rachel is cold-hearted and selfish and unappreciative of what her community has done to fight and survive through this tragedy.
Everyone's going to put their head on their pillow tonight.
Yes.
You guys woke up this morning not knowing this was going to happen. You knew it was going to happen someday, but didn't realize it was going to happen today.
Yeah.
You guys are going to go to sleep tonight. What's going to be on the back of your minds?
So just move it
I
along.
think it's a little relief, but also, it shows that we have look at us. Look at how many of us are here tonight.
And it's not just,
it's-
there's more of us.
There's tons
There's more of us, and we still have a long road ahead of us. This is just
Yeah.
the beginning. So we're
We-
here.
we're-
We're here for the long haul, every step of the way.
Yep, we're doing it.
I mean, we're going to be at every event, helping the community. This doesn't stop.
No.
I just want to let Nick and Autumn, Melissa.
Okay, you've been listening to community advocates who've gathered outside Queen Creek Police headquarters on the news that they are finally been waiting to hear after these many months. They said 16 weeks, 4 days. We've waited too long, but finally, and they have big smiles on their faces. They're wearing orange. That is the color for justice for Preston Lord. They have staged vigils in the communities, marches to police headquarters, not just in Queen Creek, but in Gilbert as well, and just asking for justice. They've been demanding arrests, and it looks like they're finally getting it. So, Morgan, let's talk about those charges, because felony murder, kidnapping, and then there was one also for aggravated robbery for Dominic Turner, who's the 20-year-old here. But let's get to that felony murder. And because of the kidnapping charge, you're saying there's an interesting element here.
So this is first-degree murder. Felony murder in Arizona is first-degree murder. Now, a regular first-degree murder charge is a murder with premeditation.
Right.
But if the suspect commits a certain felony during the commission of a death. So you commit a felony and somebody dies, and in this case, that felony is kidnapping. They're charging them with kidnapping because he died during the kidnapping. They're allowed to do felony murder, which is first-degree murder in Arizona.
That's a
and
huge difference.
It's eligible for the death penalty.
Right. So had that kidnapping charge not been part of these charges, were we looking at possibly lesser charges like a second degree or a manslaughter? So really that kidnapping element is what upped the ante for this entire case.
Yeah, and she stated something that sort of indicates that if the kidnapping and felony murder charge stick, they will stay. But in the, what did she use?
Alternative
in the
murder.
Alternative, it's second degree murder, which I've got the state statute here, and it is a murder without premeditation when somebody knows that the person's conduct will cause death or serious physical injury, or uses extreme indifference to human life. So it's an interesting mix of charges there. The kidnapping charge, you normally hear kidnapping, somebody's kidnapped and held for ransom, but under Arizona's law, just restraining somebody with
Against
the
their will.
intent, against their will, restraining them is eligible for kidnapping. So they're using that to ramp this up to first-degree murder, and that's a big decision and has a lot of consequences.
The county attorney talked about 600 clips of video that her detectives watched over and over again, and thousands of pages of reports. So we've seen, not just in the allegations with this particular case, but also the others in the greater Gilbert Goons investigations that are not necessarily the same people involved in this investigation, in this case, sort of an ambush-style attack. And that's been the allegation that a group of teens surrounded Preston with two other of his friends outside that Halloween house party, and again, like you said, kept him from leaving, and that would be that kidnapping charge. Now, I know you also did a sidebar story with other detectives on the possibility of street gang crime charges as like in addition when it comes to sentencing guidelines here. But we did just get an update from Gilbert Police. They're standing by to do a whole briefing in the next hour. 8:30 they're going to give us an update. So could that play into this as well?
I think so. Well, we'll find out, because you heard some questions there at the end of the press conference asking Queen Creek Police Chief Randy Bryce what's happening with the Gilbert Goons and what is the involvement, if any, in the Preston Lord investigation. Because if they are deemed a criminal street gang legally in Arizona, that could change the charging and also would play a big part in the sentencing, right, Morgan?
Yeah, that would be an enhancement.
Yes.
Not necessarily on a murder charge, because that's the
worst
biggest
of the worst,
charge.
yeah.
Right.
But if there are other people who are arrested for accompliceing, or if they were getting in the way of the investigation or not cooperating, that street gang charge could send them to prison. It could raise a misdemeanor up to a felony.
And so the police chief said they've been working with these other jurisdictions. My belief is that with Gilbert saying almost immediately after this press conference that now we're going to hold this, they might be the ones that are going to say whether or not the Gilbert Goons are a legal criminal street gang. And we know that DPS has also been looking into that as well with Gilbert Police.
They've been working with the FBI. They've been working with all these other jurisdictions she mentioned. Mesa, Gilbert, Queen Creek, of course, but also when I interviewed the Queen Creek Chief of Police in January, he confirmed for me at that time that Gilbert, their detectives, would be the agency that would head up identifying members of these so-called Gilbert Goons as are they classified as a criminal street gang. So that could potentially lead us down the direction of what might be to come at 8:30 if it is in some way, in any way, tied to the Preston Lord homicide investigation.
Yeah, the Queen Creek Police Chief said that his purview was specifically this murder and not anything else. And so that does lead us to believe that we're going to hear more about the ancillary charges or the street gang in an hour.
And I know she said that there were 3 juveniles, 1 adult. Everybody is being charged as an adult. How does that change the outcome of this if we're looking at that first-degree murder, that felony murder charge? Had these teens, I'm assuming maybe 17-year-olds, 16 potentially, had they been charged as juveniles for these crimes, possibly a lot less consequence than what they're looking at now.
Well, if you're charged as a juvenile in Arizona, the consequences of your conviction end when you turn 18. So the fact that they're charged as adults means that they can be charged with first-degree murder, means their consequences will go well into the rest of their lives, potentially for their entire lives.
So it was interesting because County Attorney Rachel Mitchell started off by saying, let's remember, this is a 16-year-old boy. So she always said, and when I talked to Chief Bryce, he said at the same time too, let's always keep Preston at the center of the focus of this investigation. So he was 16, a junior at Combs High School in Santan Valley, a star student. He played golf, he played basketball, and this happened, really disrupting the community. And you heard in the post-news conference kind of gathering of those community advocates, them saying, we knew the next day who was involved in this. But County Attorney Rachel Mitchell said, I want to caution folks who have been getting on social media, swirling speculations and sharing their theories, unfounded, ill-informed theories, and I'm warning you to pause your actions on this because it has been very interesting. We've seen a lot of people, kind of couch-side analysts who have been going to great lengths on TikTok, on Instagram stories, and just sharing theories that have caused a lot of negative swirlings. I will say on the flip side, we've seen a lot of positive things happen. You saw the folks in the orange shirts and kind of demanding justice, going to the town council meetings, going to school board meetings for the first time probably in ever, but demanding action from the mayor, from the town council, from the police chiefs.
Yeah, the downside of that is these people are naming names on social media, and it's possible that some of the people they have named had nothing to do with this. So they're destroying their reputations, you know, painting them in a false light, libeling them. So if some of those people who were named do not end up being charged, it's a big problem for those people. It's also a big problem for the people who named those names, because then they are liable for a lawsuit.
Yeah, and that's certainly something we've seen going around here. Here's some footage of folks kind of gathering, hugging. I have been getting, my phone has been blowing up all day with text messages. I will tell you what, these moms, you see the sign, be an upstander. They said, don't stand by, stand up for justice, because early on it was like a crazy lockdown. We heard from so many families out there that teens who were involved in the Preston Lord beating death were threatening others, were using burner phones and kind of, you know, don't talk about this, or we'll do you like we did Preston. Terrible allegations coming out of there. So it was kind of like lockdown and very hard to get true information on what was really going on, who was really involved. Here's some footage of some of the basketball games, and Combs High School and ALA Gilbert North actually suspended a handful of their games because there was such bad blood between those two campuses, and some of the players were talking trash, and school said, you know, this could be a liability for us if it comes to further violence on campus. We can't have that.
Yeah, and one of the indications that all of that community action actually created pressure and put pressure on our prosecutors and our police officers is the fact that we know that grand juries meet on Wednesday. This grand jury met this morning, handed up the indictments today, and today they were already out there making the arrests, and investigators.
In fact, we've got some footage because we had to be very responsible about hanging on to this footage, waiting to get information from law enforcement and the county attorney, confirming that the SWAT callouts that we saw this morning, this was in the White Wing area this afternoon, that it was in fact tied to the Preston Lord investigation. So you see Queen Creek Police out there with their SWAT van going to these houses after they got the grand jury indictment. And it is interesting, Morgan, because she talked about an investigative grand jury. They got the case in hand February 7th, and they talked about waiting for that medical examiner's report. So they got that on the 14th, and they said that was kind of critical. We know, we haven't seen the report in hand, but we know that the medical examiner has deemed this a homicide.
Yeah, and that's typically the last thing that the prosecutors need, because it takes a long time for the medical examiner to render their decision. And in a case where we're not sure what the cause of death was, this death occurred a couple of days later, that is the final thing. It says, okay, you are set to go. And there probably were some additional questions by members of the grand jury, some additional interviews, and then today they came to their opinion. They came to their decision.
I thought it was also very interesting that both the county attorney and chief of police stressed that there could be additional charges, that there were in fact in progress of making additional arrests, but additional charges. So when I talked to the chief before about what about negligent homicide, obstruction, so we talked about how this all sparked with a house party. There were two giant, like hundreds and hundreds of teenagers at two separate house parties on the night of. That was October 28th. It was a Halloween house party. And in fact, I got my hands on, and I've covered up the address here, but this was going around on Snapchat, and it said Halloween costume rager, open invite alcohol provided. So I asked the chief, could this family, if their teen daughter put this out on social media, could that family be liable? That father has said, spoken to reporters before to say, I was there, I left for an hour, I came back, it was out of hand, and police swung by and they left. They didn't see any, any criminal activity or behavior, but could that family potentially have some criminal liability?
I mean, it's possible. It is more likely that there's civil liability here for them.
Okay.
They could be the targets of a lawsuit. The bar is a lot lower for the evidence that somebody is liable.
That it contributed to the death of, or the what played out.
Liable. Yeah, criminal, the bar is pretty high. I can't think of a law offhand, but that doesn't mean that there isn't one there. But I do think that there could be other charges involved in this that didn't sort of constitute the actual murder, and those charges of obstructing justice, getting in the way of police. I don't know if it's telling your kids they can't talk to the police. That's probably not one of them. But hiding evidence, concealing evidence, and not cooperating in certain ways, that could lead to some charges. Accessories after the fact. Did they help these kids, these adults who perpetrated the murder, they help them after the fact? They could be criminally liable as well.
We do not know. We know in the Goons cases that have been unfolding, other assaults at the Gilbert In and Out, bonfires in the desert, and these things that have been happening over months and potentially years, that many of those assaults were caught on camera. They were streamed on Snapchat, things like that. There is, to this point, no confirmation from anyone in law enforcement or the prosecutor's office that this particular homicide was ever videotaped in any way, shape, or form. So we're still waiting for that information. But it is interesting because when I asked the chief specifically about the obstruction, like you said, about the parents, because he said from the get-go, some of these families that they know to be involved or believed to be involved and now have received grand jury indictments on, told them no. Told them, you're not going to talk to my child right out the gate. But he also was clear to say that's not illegal. They have every right to get legal advice first. But there was a delay in just being open with the investigation that kind of jammed things up for them.
Yeah, and it could be destroying evidence. That would be covering tracks, destroying evidence. That would be a typical, something used in an obstruction charge.
I thought one thing that was interesting, so we have these 4 indictments. We know that there was charges recommended against 7 people, and at the time we were told 2 adults. Well, William Owen Hines is an adult.
Right.
So that means there's only 1 other adult then in those original 7 people. Is that another teen like William Hines is, or are we talking an older adult like a parent? I thought that was interesting because I think originally there was a lot of thought where it could be parents that are culpable here that were either hiding evidence or trying to keep that under wraps, more or less, cover that up. Was it anybody involved who was holding those parties, letting kids there? But now this would lead me to believe it could be another teen that was an adult, that's an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old. So that could be different too.
It's a pretty wild web, but we do know that Talon Renner's dad, Travis, was previously arrested. So initially, Queen Creek PD went out and did search warrants November 8th in the White Wing neighborhood in Gilbert, and kind of served those search warrants. That's where they got some more evidence and kind of filing through everybody's cell phone, trying to see, is there any more evidence on this October 28th attack. But that's also the initial search warrant is what led to the arrest of his father for drug charges and his older brother for drug charges, not related to necessarily the Preston Lord homicide. But it is just weird because you have so many groups of kids from different schools, different campuses, even different cities. So you have all these jurisdictions, and I think from the very get-go, there have been a lot of community advocates who've been very invested in this case, and they're feeding us tips, and we're confirming it with law enforcement and all those things along the way. But if you imagine what it's been like for federal agents, they even put out a $10,000 reward. So they got flooded with tips, hundreds in a week. And I know that like even the family's GoFundMe that was set up for Preston, they had more than 2,000 donors giving more than $138,000. Wow. This is the community investment and interest in this case has just been overwhelming.
And arguably, the advocacy that people have done, getting out there on social media, showing the videos, showing these marches, put pressure on these law enforcement agencies to actually take action. And I think that that's where a lot of the source of the frustration has been from a lot of these parents. I've been at several of these meetings, these town council meetings, or even some of these school board meetings, and you can tell that there's so much anger because they've been saying, we've been out here, we know what's going on, and so why is it taking this long to do everything? On the flip side of that, the caveat is that you heard Rachel Mitchell talk about it, more than 600 videos and pictures of evidence in the Preston Lord case alone. That's so much to go through when you're an investigator and a prosecutor within the office, looking at that and making sure you have all of your T's crossed, your I's dotted with what are we looking at in these videos and who is this going to implicate?
I think what makes people's blood boil with this case is that why did this teenager have to die for detectives to start investigating these so-called Gilbert goons?
Right.
I've heard it time and again of people saying this case is what forced detectives to reopen cases. We know that Gilbert Police has reopened at least 8 cases they had previously closed that have now been tied to those so-called Gilbert goons. And they said, I don't know if it's bad police work because they never articulated that in the initial reports, or if maybe the patrol sergeant didn't put 2 and 2 together to say, hey, we've got more than a dozen assaults happening at the same in and out with the same style of ambush style attacks of teens going after one other high schooler. It seems outnumbered. What's going on here? But we know that there have been arrests in Mesa. Pinal County has made arrests and Gilbert has made arrests. And the county attorney did a breakdown of numbers. She said 20 people officially charged to this date, not tied to Preston Lord's murder, but to those unrelated Gilbert goons case. 13 adults, 7 juveniles, so 20 altogether, facing a collective 54 charges. And we're talking drug charges, assault charges, and robbery, because there was another one where a kid got his shoes stolen. So.
Right. It's one of those situations where if you're a police officer in a city and you're out on the beat, you are expected to have your finger on the pulse of the community. If there is a new gang operating in your area, you would expect to know that this gang was out there. And what we heard in December was they did not know that there was a new gang out there. They were unaware that these were related. And that situation has caused a lot of outrage in the community.
Even if they're unawares of this moniker, the Gilbert Goons, because some of them said, oh, it was a joking thing, we weren't really meaning it, that type of a thing. But wouldn't you think that the MO would start to ping, like there are certain patrol groups and they'll say, this is a trouble spot here, or this desert bonfire is a trouble spot here. And then they're starting to compare notes and say, we're also seeing something here. And this is similar. I'm seeing brass knuckles on this case out at Desert Ridge. Oh, we had brass knuckles in this garage case in Gilbert. So what was the failure to connect the dots? Did it take the death of a 16-year-old boy? That's why families are outraged right now, saying, you know, we've had calls for the mayor to be fired, for the police chief in Gilbert to be fired, you know, but we're just waiting to see what's going to happen with this now.
We've asked that question of the Gilbert police chief over and over again, and we have not received a suitable answer. What was the disconnect between your officers and the community where they missed this?
I did go back and I read in the first data dump, we got 220 pages for a single police report from one of the Gilbert cases. And this was an assault that happened, and it was a teenager who had been threatened. He's living out of the country now. But when police said we reopened the investigation, it was on 2 terms. One was because some video evidence, I believe from Snapchat, was not uploaded properly into the system as physical evidence. And then 2, that witnesses who gave their names and cell phone numbers or telephone numbers were not then contacted by detectives. So those seem to be 2 glaring discrepancies.
Yeah.
And thus the reason for Gilbert to reopen those investigations.
A lot of people have called on there to be a third-party investigation of Gilbert Police's handling of these cases and to look into what was missed. Why did it take so long to reopen some of these? That has not happened yet, but a lot of people are hoping that maybe after all of this, that a third-party agency comes in, maybe the DPS, because they are the state agency that would look into something like that, to see was there systematic failure within Gilbert Police that led to so many of these cases going uninvestigated for so long or ignored.
Yeah, and these weren't just cases. These were kids who were beat up. These were families who had complained to the police. These are families who had said, my son was beaten brutally and hospitalized, and nobody has been arrested in this case. And what are they supposed to do? And now some of those families are getting ready to file lawsuits against certain public agencies. Yeah, I don't know if it was a lawsuit yet or just a notice of claim. But you put yourself in those parents' positions, and you know that this happened to your child, and there were no arrests, and it appears that some of those cases were either just put on hold or they were closed for the time being. I think that is really leading to a lot of this outrage that came up after Preston Lord's murder, which is, so it took somebody to be murdered now for this to be taken seriously.
Which is heartbreaking. And again, there's been like a text chain of concerned parents and family members who've organized all these rallies and vigils. And they said that they're gathering tomorrow in the Ranchettes neighborhood in Queen Creek at 5:30 to take back the streets, to take back Preston's life. That's the street where he was beat down and died 2 days later. There has been serious community backlash. Let's talk about that for a minute, because in that police report I mentioned earlier, it named an elementary school principal who's since been put on leave. We know that Talon Renner's mom had community backlash and she lost her OHM franchisee license. There have been coaches who have been booted off the job. So again, we go to like when people aren't seeing law enforcement making moves, they go, I don't know, would you call it vigilanteism? That's what the chief was like, this kind of, it kind of empowered or emboldened them to take matters into their own hands. Right,
and we just don't know, were these people suffering retribution for no reason? We just don't know because we haven't seen the police reports. This is as much information as we had. We don't really know, like, specifically what these 4 people who were arrested today, what they did, other than they were responsible for the murder. He died while they were committing a kidnapping felony, but we don't know physically what they did. So there's still a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of details left out.
Just doing some quick math here based on the date of births here in this press release from the county attorney. It looks like William Hines is 18, which we knew. Talon Renner, 17 years old. Dominic Turner, 20 years old. And Talon Vigil, 17 years old. Like, puts it into perspective. I mean, we're talking about young adults and teenagers in this who are facing tremendous crimes for taking the life of a 16-year-old. When you think about it like that, it just, it's heavy. It's heavy and it's completely tragic.
It absolutely is. And if you're just joining us, just to wrap things up, we want to let you get caught up to speed here. County Attorney Rachel Mitchell and Queen Creek Police Chief Randy Bryce confirming today 4 first-degree murder felony charges, kidnapping charges against 3 teens and 1 adult. All will be charged as adults. 1 also with an aggravated robbery felony. So we obviously have a crew out getting reaction to this, and we are standing by Gilbert Police to hold a news conference at 8:30. So keep it here for all the updates. Download our free azfamily news app.